Welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. My name is Lüning, Horst Lüning. This is my son Ben, and welcome to our live stream about the islands, the whiskies of the Scottish Islands.
Yeah, the region Islands is really a strange region, as it's not really combined landmass and separated, but they're scattered all over the coast of Scotland. So how did the region actually come to be a region?
Well, this region, the islands, is my personal region. So, so there are regulations in Scotland and laws from Great Britain which regulated for centuries probably how the regions were divided in Scotland. So there had been the Highlands, there were the Speyside, the Isle of Islay, Campbelltown, the Lowlands, but there had not been a particular island region. Why that? Well, I don't know. When we started sorting our whiskies, we've seen, well, it's islands. So there had been a special region of Islay, and the rest, well, it's islands. And so I decided to put all those whiskies into islands.
Yeah.
And so that stays until today. So we picked out of different islands those whiskies, and the islands in Scotland are only on the northern and western shore. The eastern shore has no islands.
Yeah, let's have a look on the map. And here you see all the regions, and we've already done quite a number of the regions. We had the Lowlands, we had the Highlands, we had the Isle of Islay, which is also an island, but we don't count them to the islands.
Because it was an old regulated region.
So it's kind of a region on its own. And now let's have a look at the specific islands. We start off with the most southern island, Isle of Arun, which is between Glasgow and the peninsula of Kintyre. And then on the other side, there's a small island, don't know what that is, but then we have Islay, which we don't look at today, and north of that we have Jura, where we're going to have a look at the Jura 10 today. And then we go even further north. The big one is called Mull. There's also a distillery there.
Tobermory and the Lichick.
Then there is another island, another few small islands that are not really that important, and then we have the big Isle of Skye. Isle of Skye is so close to the mainland that it actually has a bridge
for 2 decades probably.
Yeah. So you can drive with your car to the Isle of Skye. And the Isle of Skye is the home of the Talisker whiskey we're gonna have as the third whiskey today. North of Skye is the Isle of Harris, which now has a distillery as well, and that distillery now has a whiskey.
You can't pronounce them. Those whiskies up there, they have weird spellings and pronunciations.
And the big one, not quite sure what they were called, Usk, I think, North Usk and South Usk. But the very, very northern one here on the map, that is the Orkney Island. And
it's not only an island, it's a archipel with lots of islands.
Yep.
And the biggest one on that is
Orkney.
All are called Orkney Islands.
So Orkney Islands, and the biggest one is called?
Mainland. Or something like
mainland.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
And on that, Highland Park is located. And and there's still another island which is not, or an archipel, not visible. There's the Shetlands, very much to the north.
Yeah, there's a guy from Denmark coming in here, and that is a coincidence because the island of Orkney, and I think even Talisker, also the Isle of Skye, they have a Nordic influence, a Scandinavian influence. So there were probably a lot of Norwegian and even Danish guys there. These Vikings.
Before the Vikings, even before.
Even before them,
yes.
Okay. So, but here the Highland Park, they really play with that Viking pride and all with the Viking heritage.
If I remember right, then the Orkney Islands were presented as a gift to the British crown, together with a princess, which was married to a king.
That was the gift. And not here on the map, but there is another group of islands very, very north of the mainland of Great Britain, and that is the Shetland Island. Shetland Islands, or is it just Shetland?
Yes,
oh, sorry.
Already.
Okay.
Over-concentrated.
Yeah. So do the Shetlands still call to the? Do they still count to the British Islands?
You mean the United Kingdom?
They're in the United Kingdom, for sure, but the British Islands are a geographic location, and the United Kingdom is a political location. Okay, so anyway, the islands were a bit different because they usually had a separate king, the Lord of the Isles, and they were really even further out than the Highlands, or pretty similar out to the Highlands, very, very back in the days. But later then, with bigger navies and more bigger ships, then the islands were kind of going more to the empire, and so that was allowed to be there was allowed to be stilling there, and they really got a hype in stilling at some point because the guys at sea, the sailors, the marines, they all wanted something good to drink, so all the islands had a big advantage, so a ship could just hold there, buy a few barrels or casks of whiskey, and then head off to adventure or whatever they're gonna do there.
So let me first, a little bit of interruption. Thank you very much for all the greetings from all over the world.
Oh yeah,
wonderful to read your comments. So we see the top chat a little bit above the camera. So if you see me looking up, I'm looking at the chat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So somebody said Great Britain is an island. Changed my mind. Yeah, it is an island. It's the biggest of the British islands. But today we're going to focus on what really makes an island distillery an island distillery. And first of all, it's located on islands. So nearly all of the distilleries are located near the shore, just like this one here. That was really nice and easy because you could just unload all your packages and get all the stuff for your production with a pier. But what happens if you have a storm? What are you gonna unload there? You're gonna unload casks and all that kind of stuff. So every distillery has a kind of a yard in front of their distillery where all the stuff from the ships were just stored for then later being put into the buildings. Yeah.
And one very necessary thing, you have to write the letters big on the warehouses so that you do not unload at the wrong distillery.
That could be really easy. So that's why they all have the big names on the side of the warehouses. So how did that look back in the days? This is already a bit into the industrial age. You can see there's big chimneys, and the boat is not really a sail ship, but also already a little bit of a steamer there. So there's rails going into the distillery that probably been pulled by a donkey or a horse. And so there's the typical island distillery. You have a pier and casks are being unloaded there, rolled to the distillery. And here you have a little problem because of shallow water. That's why the pier has to be a bit further away from the distillery. So they had to build these small rails. The next picture shows a bit more closely how that happens. Also a bit more into the industrial age. This is probably the 1800s. And all the guys are unloading, rolling the barrels, empty barrels out of the ship, full barrels back onto the ship. And this is the usual work that has been done from the transportation back in the days. And the thing was, the problem is when you come on with a ship to a port is when you have storm. If there's no storm, everything is easy. But what happens when you have a storm? You want to get to shore to have your ship safe. And what the guys do is they build what do you call it, a mole?
A pier.
A pier, not a pier, is just on stems, but this is a protection area for the waves. So the waves are breaking at this point, and inside the harbor, so called, then you have a still water. And you can either build it, or most of the distilleries, they are lucky to have a natural harbor. Here we see the Isle of Jura, and the Isle of Jura distillery is just located at the red spot. And you see these islands out there, and that little thing at the very bottom that shows into the sea. And that is also stones, and they really break the waves. So inside this area, the sea is more calm than outside when there is a storm. So it's really a natural harbor where you just have to build a pier, and then you can really unload all your cargo very safely. And that is very, very typical for distilleries and also towns, that they are all built where you have a little bit of a natural harbor going on. So have a look when you go look where the distillery is that you want to visit. Have a look if there are little islands in front of the distillery, because that's very, very probable. I know of a lot of distilleries that have that feature. If we go on to that pier, you can take a really, really good picture of the distillery and the town. So the distillery is really the one at the very, very center of the distillery, where you have the big letters Jura. In front of it is the Jura Hotel, very good hotel, and kind of the only hotel and the only restaurant in town. And they really have good venison. So it's really nice when you visit them for 1 or 2 days. You get really, really nice venison. If you
I think they have more deers on the island than people.
A lot more, 10 times, tenfold. And the thing is, when you stay at the Jura distillery as, I don't know, an intern or somebody who has to work there for longer, then you really get sick of the venison, because that's all they serve there at the restaurant.
No fish?
Yeah, they do have a bit of fish, but venison is really what they focus on. But the venison is really, really excellent there, especially the venison burger. Good. So that was it with a little bit of an introduction of how an island whiskey distillery is concepted and what you need to do to have a distillery there.
So, and we decided, or we have to decide in which sequence we taste those whiskies. And for sure, the Talisker, as a smoky whiskey with the highest ABV here on the table, has to be last. So this was already set. And then the Jura and the Highland Park, we have, the Highland Park has a little bit of smoke as well. So we put it in the middle and the Jura up front. But I remember the Jura as a very intense, meaning sharper whiskey. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't really sure to put it in front or not. But in the end, we said Jura, Highland Park, Talisker, and they have 10 years, 12 years, 10 years, and the ABV is 40, 40, and 45.8, as all Talisker with no cask strength have. And they are all priced, reasonably priced. The Highland Park and the Talisker a little bit above 30, and the Jura in the mid-20s. So just to give you an idea of the whiskies which we have here on the cask. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So should I pour it?
Yep. So the Jura 10 years of age I had, very, very long ago for the first time. And I think we had tastings not long ago. We had a tasting in comparison with others, but not the 10-year-old. I think
we had a Jura tasting as well.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
There were so many tastings, you forget it.
We have so many tastings.
Yeah.
So if you have it in your glass, tell us what you smell. If somebody has it at home. So for the maturation, the Jura always matures in bourbon casks, And then there is another finishing, or I think maybe they still do have just bourbon, but this one here is matured bourbon casks, and then we mature it in sherry casks. I think it's Oloroso sherry casks. Yes, Oloroso sherry casks.
So I remember that whiskey in a different way. So this is a lot smoother and more juicy than I remember it. And there's a sherry aroma on top, fruity notes, and in the back, a hint of the cask, but not too much. So it's juicy, fruity, no alcohol in the nose, very friendly. Very friendly, yeah.
Nice. Sorry. I got also, it's very, very fruity, very sweet. A mixture, a combination of ripe fresh fruits and the dried fruits, raisins, and also, yeah, very smooth, very pleasant, and a very friendly whiskey. So this would actually be, for me, it would be a nice whiskey to show a beginner. Oh,
cheers.
Cheers.
Slange. Now it's more juicy. Probably peaches, probably tangerines, not sweet enough for tangerines, fruity, and more spiciness, a little bit of dark chocolate, growing spicy. Yeah, aftertaste, quite long, little fruitiness as well, but a decent cask influence, yeah.
It's very, for me, it's a strong cask influence. Very smooth, very light. A little bit of a aromatic or citrus flavor, so it's a bit fresh, but combined with a lot of oak and a lot of sherry and a lot of a little bit of chocolate note as well, bitter notes that just finish out. Nice.
So I'm completely disturbed here because it's so different to what I remember. So I have that as one of the most intense whiskies with only 40 ABV, and this one is a welcoming, smooth, gentle, Oloroso sherry influenced type of whiskey. So it belongs more to the Highlands than to a fictional island. Yeah, most of the island distilleries were located legally to the Highlands.
Yeah. The thing is, this is the smoothest or the easiest, or one of the easiest of the Jura distillery. There are other bottlings that have smoke in it. I wouldn't say more intense. Yeah, most of them that are more hefty or smoky. So the Jura whiskies, I would say, easy, enjoyable, especially the 10-year-old.
And this one is an old distillery because it wasn't illegal to distill on the islands. So this is 1810. So 14 years or 14 years founded before the other distilleries.
Yeah, and
the islands.
I think it was the story was, as I remember, was what was his name? Campbell was the last name, and he was managing distillery. I'm not quite sure if he founded that, and he was a really, really rich guy, and he left the distillery with nothing. And there was a story about a shaman who said, "Oh, he will leave only with a cart of what he can carry and nothing else." And watch the distillery video. I have the full story there. I can't remember the story because it was just an old folklore tale. So, but what is now different to a normal Highland land whiskey from this island whiskey. Their process of producing is not really different. It's because they have the stills. If they use peat or not, more people on the islands use peat just because of traditions. But what we mainly focus is the maturation in the warehouses.
Yeah, and this picture is from the warehouse number 1 from Beaumont. And there you can see those sherry casks. And in the back you see a stone wall. And with the next picture we have a closer look at that stone wall behind those casks. And on the other side there is Loch Indal. So on the other side there is salt water. And if you have a close look at the wall, you can see that it's wet, and from time to time there are drops dropping down the wall. So that is salt water. And if you look at the first cask in the front, which is a royal cask, you see some white on the cask that might come from the chalk on the floor or from other things, but there might also be a little bit of salt on the outside of the cask.
Mm-hmm. And that's what the people are saying, that the salt inside the air there is getting into the whiskey. So that's what they say that is different between the whiskey from the mainland and from the islands.
Might be a myth.
Might be a myth. Why?
Because if you look at the air there and the average wind velocities, then 20 minutes after that, this wind is going over the islands, and in 20 minutes you aren't changing a lot in the air quality or in the substances inside the air. So the air at the sea and in the Highlands is very identical. So it might be a myth, but the salt here you see in the warehouses might be which triggers the differences.
Yeah, but what we can't deny is the thing that most of the casks are stored in their backyard, and the backyard is exposed to the sea, and there will be a lot of spray going on to the casks, so there will be also a bit of salt water on the cask just because the casks are being stored in the backyard of a distillery. This is the distillery of Talisker, and you can see all the distilleries we have here are pretty close to the sea. So there will be an influence of sea at the distillery. But the next distillery we're going to look at is the distillery of Highland Park. And Highland Park is not directly next to the sea, right?
Yeah, this one I have visited, not you. And Jura you had, not me. So Highland Park is further away from the sea, probably a few kilometers, and sitting a little bit on top of a hill. And so there is this direct influence from the sea isn't there. And
there is one question.
Yeah, this from James White I would like to answer.
Yeah.
Question, Horse and Ben, do you think the stories behind the whiskey are more than just marketing? Does a great story change the appreciation of the drink? Well, have a look at Mercedes. Mercedes, he built that first machine combustion engine powered car, and then he was a little anxious man, and his wife took both kids, teenagers, and then he drove with that car without the knowing her husband that she's doing that quite a few tens of kilometers up to Pforzheim. So this was quite a distance, and at the pharmacy she got new petrol. And this story is something which helps to put that brand into perspective, that they are one of the first, and that helps the marketing. But those stories have to be true. So having now the story of the Campbells with the Jura distillery, that those men left their fortune inside the distillery. They show how remote those distilleries were in those times, and that Highland Park is very remote on the Orkneys. This all shows the surrounding of the distillery in the social vicinity. They are mixed in, so they belong to the whiskey, and with that you understand why the smokiness on the islands is stronger than on the mainland, because on the mainland you had the railroads, and then the coal could be transported, and it was expensive to bring the coal out to the islands, but labor was cheap, people were unemployed, so they cut peat for distilleries, and all those stories help to understand how those distilleries developed and how their character had been built. So yes, they help building the brand in terms of marketing, but on the other side, they have to be true, so that you can follow them and understand what's going on.
And psychology has shown that if you like the marketing, then the product is better. If you don't like the marketing, the product is not better. So it really depends on what type of marketing. There's pretty bad marketing out there that's just untrue and just a bad story.
Yeah.
But
if you read on a card box on the back, this whiskey might be savored with Coke and ice and everything. They would like to sell to everybody, and they are not that much focused on the single malt whiskey.
Yeah. So this is now the Highland Park. This has a strong marketing on their Nordic culture that came to the island. Does it have an influence? You decide.
Yeah, there had been times where they liked to be part of the Scotch experience, be part of the mainland with the old bottles, and then they said, well, we have an old influence from the Vikings, and now we switch over, so to differentiate to the others.
Yeah, so they still write Scotch on it, don't they?
Yeah, they have to.
Single malt Scotch whiskey. Or they couldn't just call it whiskey.
And 1798, that's an old distillery.
Yeah. So,
Horst, as a German, how did you come to enjoy whiskey and blah, blah, blah? In the end of this live stream, we tell about a next one where we can answer all those questions, so that there will be a little talk.
Yeah.
So we don't answer those questions here. Now it's about the islands. And the Highland Park has a wonderful light smoky note. Not too strong, not that strong that you can't taste immediately the other influences which are in. So we have bourbon cask influence, we have sherry cask influence, and a little sweetness as well, and there is some herbs in it. There was heather herbs. Yeah. It's
a very nice mixture between a lightly peated whiskey, fresh whiskey with the heather, a little bit of a bloomy, flowery note, and a little bit of a sherry and a little bit of a citrus character. So it's a really complex whiskey for a 12-year-old. I like it. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, cheers. Double time.
Yeah. I pour not so little whiskey because you always pour. That when I pour, it's like.
A wonderful mouthful, juicy, a little sweetness, some, juice oranges or tangerines. Now the smokiness is getting bigger in my mouth, but not that strong that it's cladding everything. No, this is just smokiness as I like it. And the aftertone A lot of maltiness now coming through. Of course, it's a malt whiskey. And I most often forget to tell about the maltiness because it's so default in those whiskies. Wonderful medium to long aftertaste.
Wonderful whiskey. It's pretty juicy. You have a good amount of smokiness, fresh fruits, dried fruits. Again, very, very, very complex. A lovely whiskey with a little bit of a chocolate and oak note in the very end. So it's a bit of a stronger flavors, bit of a bitter flavors, bittersweet flavors. Very nice.
We had a live stream before in German language, and so this is the second time I have that in my glass. And today, or after that second time, it's a little bit more spicy. The aftertaste, the oakiness in the aftertaste tastes longer now, and the smokiness is stronger as well. Yeah.
Very interesting fact about your taste buds. You don't realize, you don't feel, and especially smell taste, but differences in taste. So if you smell smoky whiskies all the time, and then you smell a different smoky whiskey, you only smell the differences. You can smell then easier what is inside a smoky whiskey if you had smoky whiskey before. When you want to see what is inside the whiskey apart from smoke. But very, very strange topic. So the assortment, how you taste your whiskey, is very important. So if you have whiskeys at home, more than just one or few bottles, you can do a lot of combinations, and it's always a different experience. And also, whiskey is just very dependent on how you feel, how you have around, and how you just drink your whiskey. That there's always a lot of complexity in there. Good.
One, yeah.
So, kiln. Next up is, why is our whiskey smoky? We already had a bit of that. That's why I'm gonna do it a bit faster. And this here is the kiln from Highland Park, right?
Yeah, I had been there with a cruise ship. So I got the passage for free, but I had to had some groups showing through distilleries, and had a presentation the evening. That was the first time somebody fell asleep in presentation, because we had the whiskey tasting first and then the presentation. Yeah. So, and there I had a group of visitors going through the distillery, and this is one of several kilns Highland Park has. And Highland Park, because it's so remote, has more than or more malts which they produce themselves. Most of the other distilleries, they have just 5, 10, 15% of malt producing themselves, just to show the tourist that they are making their own malts in their own maltings. But Highland Park naturally had to do more because they were more remote than others. That was what I heard in 2005 when I visited the distillery. In the meantime, I think they increased production a lot. Probably they fell from those 40-35% own malt down to the 15 all others have today. But then in those days they had 35-40% of their own malt, and that is the whiskey which we now see in the bottle of Highland Park.
Mm-hmm. So this is where the peat is being burned and the smoke actually is being produced, and the next floor then is where the malt is being spread out, and the water inside the malt is being evaporated, so it's dried, and the malt comes in contact with a peat, and that gives off phenols, and these phenols is what you experience as smoky. But what we're gonna want to find out is now, why is the Talisker whiskey so spicy? We're not gonna find out if it's chili or pepper. That's a very, very different discussion, and that's really, really, really In the malt head section, that is really a really big discussion. But we're gonna look at why is it spicy, however, if it's chili or pepper.
There's a tale out there that it's the lion arm, the special lion arms you see at Talisker, that the whiskey is so spicy. But I think that's a myth. That's not true, because here we see these weird lion arms. So we see two wash stills with a reflux bowl, and on the top where the lion arm runs to the wall, you see the lion arm is a little bit falling down, so everything which goes over the top will immediately flow down into the direction of the cooler, and then you have this additional S-shaped swing in that lion arm. But I think that comes from different type of condensing equipment outside. So in the past, I think they went right through the wall to the condenser outside, and then they changed that. Or they increased the height of the wash still and want to go through the old holes. So they had to go down for that. But I don't think that this is making a whiskey sharper. No.
Yeah. Especially because the wash still does not really have an influence on the flavor of the whiskey. It does have, but a minor influence.
So here we see the spirit stills, and you see there's no reflux bowl, no constriction, which makes the column of alcohol vapors more stable. No, they are just firing out to the top and then going through the lion arm outside. So here you might feel the real pot still character, and those pot stills are small, so the height of the column isn't that big. So the separation of the alcohol to the fusel oils is not that good. So we will see here a lot of aromas going over to the condenser.
So there's always a trade-off. If you have a very good separation, you have a very smooth whiskey. If you have a not so good or bad separation, then you have a very, very spicy and sharp whiskey. And the other thing why we have a spicy and sharp whiskey is the condenser. Here at the Talisker Distillery, we have a warm tub. And this is where you can see the warm tub. You were actually not allowed to go around, right?
No.
So this is the closest picture we have from the warm tub. And it's actually a very, very big tub. And there's a spiral going down of a fist-sized tube. And that is actually just a tube. And that condenses the whiskey because there's a lot of cold water from the loch or from the mountains in that tub, and that condenses the air, the whiskey vapors back to the liquid. And that is very different to the normal condensers, which are shell and tube, which are very, very fine. There's a lot of copper in it, and with that gives you a lot of copper contact and makes the whiskey very smooth because there are catalytic reactions between the vapors and the whiskey and the copper, and that gives you a very smooth whiskey. Here with a warm tub, you don't have that. You have
it's running right through very fast.
And it's very, very cold. So very, very fast condensation and not a lot of contact. So we have the true spirit of the distillation and a very sharp and old character of a whiskey. You can also see that at Mortlach, a sister distillery to Talisker, and they also have condensers, and they're called the Beast of Dufftown. That means they're really, really spicy for a Dufftown whiskey. So let's have a look at the distillery as a whole. Here we see the distillery. Right of that is just the parking space and the lock, where we see
the parking space is to the left side.
To the left side.
And the lock is on the right side.
Obviously, I have not been there. So this is the distillery, and there's a little river going through there.
Yeah, this comes from the hills above. But Talisker had in the past water shortages. Not now, but 2 decades, 3 decades ago. So they had to build a dam up in the hills to collect all the water falling down there. So today the water supply is fine, but we were there in August, I think, and so there wasn't much rain out there, so the water was very low, and we are now at low tide. So this is a breakwater, so there's a tide influence. Yeah, I think we're through, aren't we?
Yes, so let's have the Talisker 10. Come on.
So this is not the drops. You always have to turn the bottle that way that you do not have the drops running over the label, so I managed to have them on the back label. Nick Neva, have either of you been able to try Buffalo Trace? Yes, I do.
I think I've had not a few, but I've had a few products from the distillery, but I'm not sure if I had the Buffalo Trace.
Frankfurt Distillery, yeah. Is there a difference between whiskies matured in horizontal and standing casks? Probably yes, but I try to calculate how the change in cask surface to the volume contained whiskey is, and I think it's quite equal. Yeah.
I think the Spee is different, and it's also cheaper to have it standing. So what do you have? Do you already have the peppery?
No, I think the peppery smell is part of the taste. What I do have is a more intense smoke. So if I had to give a figure, it's 25 ppm. So it's far below the Islay whiskies, but it's definitely very much above the Highland whiskies.
Yeah. So yeah, there is a bit of a smoky note there, but it's I would say it's medium. But this time now it's a bit more light than the first time I had it today. Maybe because I just got a little bit used to it already. But it's a lovely, nice sweetness. There's a good amount of smoke, but not so much that it hides everything. And a little bit of a iodine, seawater kind of taste going on.
So I have a little bit of citrus as well, and a little bit of the sea. There's a little bit of the sea, like a smell of seaweed and something.
Fresh seawater.
Yeah.
Cheers. Chill.
Now there's the spiciness, and today it's fresh ground pepper. Really spicy on the tongue, mouth-filling, juicy. The smoke covers my mouth, so it's good to have that last. Otherwise, the other whiskies would have had difficulties going over that. And there's of course, a maltiness in it, and a long, intense aftertaste. The spiciness is still there, not that intense as with the first kick, but really there.
Wow, so it's really spicy. That is really incredible how you can produce such a different outcome with just changing a bit of a method. And it's lovely. It has that but glowing feeling when you have it in your mouth, that you realize there's a bit of a hotness, bit of a sharpness going on that is just tingling and attacking your mouth a little bit. And when you swallow it down, you have a good amount of smoke. You have a little bit of a sweetness going on, maltiness, oakiness, everything going on in this whiskey.
Yeah.
Just a nice thing.
Mm-hmm. There'd been a question up there from Mr. Z. Any more distillery tours coming up in the future? Well, I left the distillery tours to Ben, who got some professional photographers with him, and had the contact and the time for having the interviews with the distillery managers and so on. And I had the last tour was from me, so we had the Stauning distillery in Denmark last time. This was the last tour, and unfortunately your tours planned for autumn were all cancelled due to...
I just had a little small tour through Switzerland, through the two main distilleries of Switzerland.
Are they online already?
No, the first one is online in Germany, and is the second one online in English?
Yes.
Yes, so the Sentis is already online, and we're looking forward to 2 new videos about the last distillery of Switzerland, the last main distillery. There are small distilleries in Switzerland as well, but I visited the 2 big ones. And hopefully next May I'm gonna do another tour. Hopefully, if I can't, then the next one will be in October. So this is when I go just before season and just after season, so I kind of miss the tourists a bit. So at this time, the whiskeys were really different. We had a very smooth and fruity one. We had a very nice, light, balanced, complex one, and we had a very strong and intense one in the end.
You see the variations in the islands, yeah. And so please make up your mind, if you had those whiskey there, that you can give a sequence. So this is 1, 2, 3, and please write the numbers in sequence how you like it most. So what is your meaning?
I remember a sequence that I had before, and I'm gonna change it. Now I like the Talisker best, then the Jura, then the Highland Park, which is really a bit unfair to the Highland Park. I always feel a bit sad for the last one. So mine is 3, 1, 2. We have 1, 3, 2, 1. And what do you have?
I still have the Highland Park first.
Okay.
So 2, 3, 1. So the Jura is a very good one, especially for the good price they have in the mid-20s. But I remember that whiskey as a non-sherry influenced whiskey, which was very, very intense, have that kick from the strength of the whiskey, even with only 40% ABV. And this changed today to a more friendly entry style malt, which I think very much will help the sales of the Jura 10, but which a little bit brought me back from that. So the Highland Park, I don't like these very intense whiskies. From time to time, yes, but I like the complex, balanced whiskies most, and that's the Highland Park 12.
Yeah, so we have 2, 3, 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. So yeah, somebody looking for more distillery videos in the future. Yeah, I do like the distillery videos as well. They are quite demanding because you have a full day of videos shooting. You just see these 6 to 8 scenes, but there's a lot going on. Just everything I tell you behind in these scenes is just very much.
Yeah.
So
then Tim Hode's question, Horace and Ben, if you could only drink one whiskey until your last day, which one would it be? That is a really hypothetical question, and I would answer it hypothetically. The whiskey I will then find the best. So there is, from my point of view, there is no best whiskey. because it's a journey. The whiskies you found wonderful 10 years ago might not be the ones you today feel wonderful. So it's moving forward, and I think I have a whiskey online here which contains the best whiskies up to 45 euros, I think. There you can find those whiskies, and the best whiskies I had, there is an older video out there, but not all of them are still available. They're gone. So it's quite difficult to say this one is the best or the other the best.
Yeah, I would switch between Lagavulin 16 or George Diggle, the 9-year-old, 10-year-old barrel select or something, the old one. But not quite sure. I would probably say the Lagavulin then. So yeah, coming up we have new live events because it's becoming winter, and we've seen that there are more people tend to watch our videos in winter because you can't go out, have a barbecue or do anything else. So even especially right now with all the situation going on, so we're gonna have 2 live events coming up. One on the 5th of December, and that will be the what is it in English? It's Santa Claus, right? Saint Nicholas. On the 5th or 6th, there's a German holiday called Nikolaus.
It's on the 6th, and they
on the 6th,
celebrate it
right?
on the evening of the 5th.
Yes, and there's it's the guy you know as the Coca-Cola man, and that goes back to a really tradition of a Christian saint. And I have both costumes of the Coca-Cola man and the original Christian saint, so you can choose if Horst should wear the Coca-Cola man or the Saint Nicholas. Just write in the comments.
I think
both have a beard. You're gonna have to wear the beard at least for 15 seconds. Yeah, it will be on the 5th of December at 2000, so 8 p.m. Central European Standard Time. That's winter time now. And you will find it on Whisky.com/live. And the next regions tasting, our last region, will be the Speyside live tasting. It will also be at 8 p.m. on the 11th of December at Whisky.com/live. If you want to, if you can't remember all that stuff, just stay subscribed on our channel or go to Whisky.com/live. You will find all the dates and more dates there because I can't be bothered to read all the other live tastings we're gonna do afterwards. Yeah, so St. Nicholas and St. Ben is the Coca-Cola man, and you're gonna be St. Nicholas. So I all want to see you with the Pope head.
And the stick.
I think both have a stick. I'm not sure if I have 2 sticks.
Oh, it's called a broom.
I don't know. Stick.
Stick.
Stick. Okay. So do you have anything else?
No.
So yeah, that was it with our island live tastings. If you like the video, we'd really appreciate if you give it a thumbs up. And sorry about yesterday, we had a little trouble with our camera. Thank you for your patience, but now I retrofitted the equipment. Now we're just gonna do full HD, and that is gonna work really well.
It was not a single fault. There had been more faults because the local provider had problems in our area.
Yeah, we had internet troubles as well. Yeah. So we had double trouble.
Usually
we really push through. We just fix it and pull through no matter what. But this time it was just not going to happen. So that's why we delayed it for 1 day. Hopefully next time we will be at a better situation and everything will run smoothly. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and see you next time.